Welcome back, everybody. Monday, February 27th. I am John Aravosis. You are here for the Aravosis Report to hear the latest news from Ukraine, about Ukraine, actually, but from Washington, D.C. So, same idea. Let me get rolling on my TikTok here. And as always, we'll take about 2 minutes for folks to arrive on YouTube and TikTok and elsewhere. And then we will start the news. So, introduce yourselves if you would. Maybe just tell folks where you are from if you feel like it. And then we'll go from there. So, woo woo. Oh boy. Flower lady. All right, the TikTokers are arriving. Lovely. Copies. Good to see you. Yes, we are going to talk about that AWACS plane. Yeah, anyway, folks, as always, thank you, Keith. Already with the gifts. Love it. Thank you. Actually, I'll unplug my. There we go. Maybe that way I can hear it. Oh, it defaults. Exactly. I will flip again. Well, there's always going to be echoing because I'm in a big room, but let me flip. Thank you for the hat there and the mustache. Oop. TikTok, for whatever crazy reason, always now switches back to the wrong way. And I don't know why. It should be normal now on TikTok. Let me know. Well, I can tell because I do this. There we go. Woo woo. It's the right way. Oh, anyway, welcome everybody. As always, we usually take a couple minutes just to let folks arrive. So otherwise, then I'm going to start and everyone goes, wait a minute, what was the first story? So we don't do that. But things are good. It's a little drizzly in DC, which means my adorable little dog is terrified and sleeping in my bathroom. Because thank you for the hat there, Benji. She just assumes that whenever there's rain, and she's smart though. She assumes when there's rain, there's lightning, and when there's lightning, there's thunder. So anytime it even drizzles, she's like away hiding. So it's very cute. Sad, but cute. All right. A couple more seconds here. Just waiting to hit a critical mass of viewers, and then we will start the show, guys. We'll talk about the latest from Ukraine. So welcome all. Cue the Russians. I know. Where are our little Russian friends? They should be arriving any moment now. Hey, Lizzie. Oh, Lizzie got banned. Oh, okay, Lizzie. Be nice. All right, guys, let's get started. I am John Aravosis. This is the Aravosis Report. Thank you for joining us today, guys. Thank you, Danny, for the hat there. This is my daily show. It's 6 p.m. Eastern time US. That's New York City time, or Washington, D.C. time, which is actually the city that I am in. We go through the latest news from Ukraine in the last 24 hours, or today being Monday, sort of over the weekend. And then the second half of the show, I take your guys' questions or your comments too. Feel free to kind of weigh in what you think is going on with different stories we're talking about. On TikTok, the way you submit your questions is go to the Q&A link. Thank you, Tattooed Mom. Go to the Q&A link in my profile, submit your questions there. And thank you, Annie, for that. And on YouTube, obviously use the question box, or any of you guys there on my laptop. You can use the box at the bottom of the screen. And I do very much appreciate the gifts on TikTok and the gifts on YouTube, because I do this for free. I'm doing it full time. I've been doing it full time since the war broke out, and decided I would make this my job for now. So if you can help me pay the bills, I very much appreciate it. And the shirt is very cool, because the shirt, somebody asked about the shirt. I was going to talk about it later, but the shirt, this is my Zelensky sweatshirt. This is the actual brand and sweatshirt that Zelensky wears whenever he's wearing his sweatshirts all winter. We were able to get them in Ukraine, and they are for auction in our Discord, because we take half the auction proceeds and channel it back into Ukrainian aid, and the other half supports my show, because I'm, as I said, do this full time, and nobody pays me other than you guys. So thank you. All right, let me just dive right in. Thanks for the gift there, Lizzie. So there was a really interesting story yesterday. It's not been confirmed, but I don't know whether we'll get it confirmed, but it's really interesting. The Discord, folks, tell if you guys can, the Discord link, actually, the links for everything I talk about in terms of my show, my Patreon, my Discord, you can find them on aravosis.com, my last name.com, or for you guys on TikTok, just go to the link in my profile, the link tree, click it, and you'll be able to see all my links there. So Belarus yesterday. Belarus, you guys may know, is Russia's ally in the war against Ukraine. They haven't jumped in to actually attack Ukraine yet, but they are letting Russia use their territory to attack Ukraine. So it's the Russians that are using Belarus to attack Ukraine. Now, quick handy dandy Ukraine map. Russia is over here. I mean, Russia's, as I always reiterate, Russia's ginormous. So Russia's more than just here. But in terms of Ukraine, Russia's over here and here. Belarus is here. Poland over here. Poland, good guys. Belarus, bad guys. Nice people, but run by a dictator named Lukashenko. Bad guy. Anyway, yesterday, Belarusian partisans, meaning Belarusian citizens who basically oppose the dictatorship and oppose the dictatorship support for Putin, went and attacked an AWACS plane, which is a Russian AWACS plane. Now, the AWACS, you'd probably be familiar with if you, oh, that's right, Carlos, I did see your super chat. You'd probably be familiar with because it's the plane that's got the big circular pancake disc on top. The US has them, the Russians have them, and it's for surveillance. It's for aerial surveillance. It can spot like 60 targets at the same time, which is kind of interesting. Thank you, Killers, for the hat there, and for basically spotting aircraft and everything else simultaneously. Well, someone attacked the plane on the ground. Reportedly, that radar disc that's on top was damaged. There was Just Judy is saying, and I had read this too. Thank you, Addie, for the duck, Affleck. Just Judy was just saying on TikTok that it was reportedly Ukraine provided drones. Thank you, Danny and Brad. That Ukraine provided drones to the basically Belarusian resistance, and they attacked the plane. Very expensive planes. I saw Elise was saying it could be a $300 million plane. I think Elise said, which is pretty wild. This is a big deal if they did sufficiently damage the plane. We don't know because the Russians and the Belarusians aren't admitting it. But from what I was reading, the Russians have like 16 of these planes, but they've only got 7 or 8 of the planes that are, I think 8 actually, that are upgraded, that they basically took the old plane and made it much better. This was one of the better planes that got attacked and in principle knocked out of commission for the time being. That's really important. Thank you, Danny, for the hat there. And and Putin sucks, excuse me, for the hat, and Danny for the other stuff, and Heather. It's a big deal because it makes it much harder for the Russians to patrol the airspace and basically defend against the Ukrainians taking off and doing stuff. There's some thinking that the Ukrainians were doing this as a basic preparation for their counteroffensive that's going to be happening maybe in the spring. We don't know when the Ukrainians are going to launch their big counterattack, but that this was basically trying to take out some of the Russian capability to patrol the airspace so that with their radar, so the Ukrainians would do a better job with basically the Ukrainian planes would have a better chance of survival. Thank you, Hector, for that. So that's a big story, but let's see if we can get it confirmed. Thank you, Zoe, for the gifts there. Mariupol keeps having explosions. This is great news for the Ukrainians. Mariupol is a Ukrainian town down here. Now, you might recall, actually, you know what? I'm sorry, real quick. Sorry, Carlos had asked a question on Super Chat, and I always get to the Super Chat questions first. And Carlos, I'm sorry, I don't usually get them this early. I totally spaced out. So let's pick up Carlos's comment or question here. A widely reported GDP contraction, meaning gross domestic product, or basically the Russian economy. So a widely reported contraction in the Russian economy for 2022 in Russia is 2.3%. Yale says more like, oh, that's interesting. Yale says more like negative 11%. Now that's interesting. Okay. I did not hear that, Carlos. That's very interesting. So we all know that there'd been a lot of talk as to whether the sanctions are having much impact and what impact they're having. And a lot of folks are saying they've got to be having an impact, but overall the Russian economy isn't doing that badly. It dropped, like you said, the consensus was that it dropped maybe 2.3%, maybe 3% last year, which would be a recession, but wouldn't be the end of the world, right? Yale, which puts out, I've been reading some of the previous Yale documents on the economy. Yale has done some really nice in-depth studies of the Russian economy where they've been arguing that the impact has actually been much greater. They did one, God, I don't know now, Carlos, whether it was 6 months ago or something. It was a great report. I mean, I read it and then summarized it for you guys. What's interesting is, and yes, CNN today too. CNN today was reporting that the Russian GDP was going to do well next year as well, or this year, I should say. Thank you, Magical Photo. So the Yale folks are saying last year was more like an 11% drop in the economy rather than a 3% or 2% drop. All I can say is I hope that's true. It's interesting because, as I said, the Yale folks have been more hawkish on this. I say hawkish meaning they all along have been saying that the Russian economy is doing much worse than everyone else thinks. And they pointed to a lot of indices and everything else. So I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I hope the folks at Yale are right, but that's very interesting. And if it's coming from them, that's pretty reputable, but let's see. Mariupol. So we were talking about Mariupol really quick. Mariupol is the Ukrainian city down here in southeastern Ukraine, under occupation. Oh, I'll get rid of the Carlos. Thank you for that, Carlos. Again, get rid of Carlos's question there. Under occupation by the Russians. The Russians, just to remind you, are occupying pretty much everything where my hand is. So 18% of Ukraine here. That includes Mariupol. Mariupol is the city where the Azov battalion were camped out at the steel plant, the Azovstal steel plant. And remember the 2,000 Ukrainian soldiers who were fighting the 14,000 Russian troops for like 2 months and really holding out quite well against them? That's Mariupol. Mariupol is also the city where the theater, the drama theater that had the word children written outside in Russian, Jetchi, it said on the side. Thank you, Chuck. And the Russians bombed it anyway, even though they knew children were inside. That's Mariupol. Now, Mariupol has been having a series of explosions over the last 2 weeks, and it's been, or last week, I should say, very suspicious. Listen to this. This is from the British Ministry of Defense. Since February 21st, so that would be 6 days ago, pro-Russian officials have reported at least 14 explosions around the Russian-occupied city of Mariupol. Sites of the incidents have included an ammunition cache and ammunition supply at the airport, 2 fuel depots, and a steelworks that Russia uses as a military base. Mariupol lies at least 80 kilometers away from the front line. I'm going to guess 80 kilometers. We're going to say 50 miles, maybe 45 miles, 50. Russia will likely be concerned. Thank you, Chuck, for the Jack in the Box. Russia will likely be concerned that unexplained explosions are occurring in a zone. This is the important part. A zone it had probably previously assessed as beyond the range of routine Ukraine strike capabilities. Now, that's what's interesting is pretty much everybody thought that Mariupol was too far away, that the Ukrainians wouldn't be able to hit it, that the current weapons they have wouldn't go that far. They're hitting it, and they hit it repeatedly over the last week. We talked about this before, but I just thought I'd bring it up again since the Brits were mentioning it today. Does it mean that we gave the Ukrainians some of the weapons that they've been wanting that go longer? We did promise the GLSDB, the ground launch small diameter bomb, which can go around 94 miles or 150 kilometers. We had promised them that. The U.S. included it as part of our latest package, maybe not our latest, but one of the latest packages about a month ago. But it wasn't supposed to arrive for a few months. So I don't know, but that's pretty cool. And hello in Greek, also in Greek, yes. So Putin gave a really weird speech today, or yesterday. I think it was yesterday, actually. I'm just going to read you some of this. It was really weird. I think what's going on is he's trying to, look, he knows the war isn't going well. He's not quite sure what to do about it. He's simply going to throw more men at it. But the problem is when you throw more men at it in Russia, they're not well trained. They don't have good equipment. So they're not really making that much of a difference, right? And at some point, he's worried that the population is going to start getting pissed off because they promised a 3-day war, right? We are now over 1 year, right? The 1 year anniversary was February 24th of the war. Thank you, user, for the hat. People may start getting upset and saying, what are you doing? And even though it's a dictatorship, dictators get overthrown when they lose wars, right? So Putin gives this weird speech, and I think he's giving the speech as a means of rallying the base at home. Basically, you've got to keep telling people they're threatened. You've got to keep telling people, and the Russians have been saying this too in the last couple of days, NATO was preparing Ukraine to invade. And I think they even said NATO was going to invade. And first of all, Ukraine was going to invade? Really? Ukraine. I mean, really? Ukraine was getting ready to invade Russia. It's like, thank you for the duck there, Lizzie. I mean, can we? You know what I mean? Like, give me a break. Russia is literally 11 time zones. I mean, that's how big Russia. You have to like look at the map and see just how freaking big Russia is, and the idea that Ukraine was going to invade is hilarious. In any case, let me read you what Putin said here. Um, when all the this is Sky News had a bunch of the quotes. When all the leading NATO countries have declared their main goal as inflicting a strategic defeat on us, how can we ignore their nuclear capabilities in these conditions? So you're like, okay, first of all, NATO has not said that they want to inflict a strategic defeat on you. I mean, NATO's been very wishy-washy as far as what they want, right? But nonetheless, he's saying, how can we ignore that they have nukes? Well, pretty easily, because why would we use our nukes when Russia has nukes? We wouldn't. So they have one goal: to scatter the former Soviet Union and its main part, the Russian Federation. What he's going to get at now is our secret goal is to destroy Russia, literally. We want to take Russia and rip it into 50 different countries. So that's what he's trying to claim now. And then maybe they will accept us into the so-called family of civilized nations, but only separately, each part separately, like because Russia will be chopped into pieces. He added, if we follow this path, I think that the destinies of many nations of Russia, and first of all, the Russian people, can change radically. Well, yeah, every minority ethnic group that the Russians have been oppressing for hundreds of years is suddenly, their lives will change radically if they become free of Russia. This is true. Yeah, it's what they do. They lie a lot, and all they can do is try to scare their people, because otherwise he's not going to have support. Real quick, I will tell you about my Discord. Thank you, Bonnie, there. We'll tell you a little bit more about the Discord. Folks were asking earlier, because it's a nice way to support my work. I do this for free. I've been doing it since the war broke out for a year now. Initially 7 days a week, now 5 days a week, full-time. And the only payment I'm getting is from you guys. No one's paying. So I appreciate all of your support. And one way you can support me is through our Discord. We've got a great Discord community. It's got already around 1,500 or more people there. It's discord.aravosis.com. You can find it in the link in my profile on TikTok, aravosis.com for you guys. And it's a neat community. It's a nice chat community: politics, Ukraine, Russia, US elections, whatever you want, sports, cooking, you name it, pets. But one thing we do, which is kind of cool, is, doing this for a year now, I had to start finding creative ways to basically pay my bills so I could keep doing this. Otherwise, I'd have to take a boring job elsewhere. But at the same time, I've really been wanting to support Ukraine. And we've been really lucky. You guys have been an amazing community. We've been able to raise, probably $85,000+ now in aid for Ukraine, money that's gone all to Ukraine, money that I have gotten zero of. That's been amazing. And what I've been doing is, for example, we've been having auctions on the Discord, and we've been getting really cool, buying cool stuff in Ukraine, basically, bring it here, and then auctioning it for you guys. 50% of the profits go to back to Ukraine for the work we're doing there, and 50% go to support my show, because I'm doing this for free full time. Thank you, Harold, for that. And one of the things we're auctioning is, I got the Zelensky sweatshirt. It's the sweatshirt, the sweatshirt that Zelensky wears all the time, wore it at the White House and everywhere. Now, mind you, it's not the sweatshirt he wore, because that would be gross. But it's the same company. The company's very well known. So we got a bunch of these. We're auctioning these off. We've got, what else have we got? We've got some cool stamps. We've got some stamps. The Ukrainians made some commemorative stamps for their most famous weapons. They've got like the HIMARS, the Javelin, a bunch of other stamps there. And the coolest thing we've got right now, and this, by the way, is the last box. We do not have any more boxes of this. Went to Ukraine. Actually, Vlad, our guy in Ukraine, went and bought 4 of these boxes. A Ukrainian charity had put these together. They were about $200 each, but my hope was you guys would like it. And fortunately, you have liked it. So thank you. Put together by a group called the Orc Busters. Now, orc is a word the Ukrainians use for Russian troops. which is very funny. Intentionally, it is meant to be a joke. Thank you, Aflac, for the duck there. It is intentionally meant to be a play on Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, calling the bad guys the orcs, right? Well, they went and got pieces of a Russian fighter jet that was shot down over Ukraine. There's a whole explanation of the jet, where it was shot down. It's an Su-30 SM, I believe. I've got all the information. And two pieces of the jet, very cool, because they're titanium. And I mean, it's they weigh nothing, and it's pretty cool. I love this stuff. I think it's totally cool. We're auctioning these off. This is the last box. This box, thank you for the flowers there, Newton. This box this auction will end on Wednesday. So go check it out if you want. We've also got some Azovstal bracelets, the bracelets made from the steel from the Azovstal plant the Ukrainian government made. I've got 2 more of those to auction off soon. I've got some other cool stuff too, actually. Well, we'll get to it. But anyway, go check out my Discord. It's a nice way to support me, but it's also, like I said, I try to have cool stuff there, because I love this stuff. I just love this stuff. So yes, we've got this is my sweatshirt, but we do have the Zelensky sweatshirts. And as I said, this is, thank you. Thank you there. User 8 for the rose there. Oh, no, Lizzie for the rose, the passion rose. Well, thank you guys. Thank you, Inspired. All right, let me keep going here. So no news yet on China and whether China is going to be giving lethal weapons to Russia. There is concern that, hang on a moment. Oh, we've got Tricky. Oh, you mods already got her, didn't you? We had a Russian sneaking in and trying to be tricky by putting their the colors of the Russian flag, but his hearts. And I was about to block her, and all of a sudden I saw, boom, she disappeared. Our moderators are the best, absolutely the best. Elisa, actually, yeah, let me get Elise first, and then we'll talk about China. Sorry about that. The New York Times. Oh yeah, I saw this. Let me read this to you. It was a very irresponsible story. Elise is bringing up that the New York Times had reported this weekend that COVID originated in a Wuhan lab in China. She said it is not only wrong, but horribly irresponsible, as it's a sensitive issue and could make China more inclined to support Russia. What the F, New York Times? What she's talking about, not a Ukraine issue, but a China issue, which could impact Ukraine. The New York Times did a story this weekend, and the headline is something to the effect of COVID began in Chinese lab, Energy Department concludes. And you're going, holy cow, right? Like, holy cow. Well, you read the story, and it says the Energy Department and I think the FBI are the only 2 federal agencies of something like 10 agencies or something like that, 8 or 10 agencies. The only 2, they hold a minority view that the COVID virus came from a Chinese lab. The other government agencies in charge of this are saying no. Okay. But these guys are saying yes. Okay. So that's the first thing. Actually, by the way, I'm seeing Greg talk about my Berlin Wall pieces. I forgot about that. You guys need to remind me. I have pieces of the Berlin Wall that I broke off in 1989, December, I believe it was the night of December 2nd to December 3rd, 1989, right as the wall was coming down, I was there. I have a lot of additional little pieces. I don't know whether that kind of stuff, thank you, by the way, for the galaxy there, that who did that for Riverside. I don't know if that stuff interests people still. Again, I love this stuff, but I've got, like I said, I've got lots of little pieces of the wall that maybe we can auction some of those off on the Discord too, if that interests people. I don't know whether people can get, now mind you, the good part about this is I've got a picture of me breaking it off the wall. So like, this one is real. Buy it on eBay, you don't know. I think I'm gonna auction it. No, I totally forgot, because I've got a bunch of little pieces and I don't need all the little pieces. Thank you, darling, for the gift there. So here's the New York Times story. This is actually important about the COVID stuff. So what the Times story said was, actually, the Energy Department and another agency, I believe the FBI, though, I think it was the FBI, which is not an insignificant agency, are of a minority view among the agencies of the U.S. that the that the COVID virus came from a Chinese lab, that it escaped from a Chinese lab. The other US agencies, the majority of them, do not think so. It goes more. The Energy Department, now the Energy Department is kind of a weird choice, but the Energy Department actually is an expert on this because they run a lot of government labs, government laboratories. So, they would know something about this. The Energy Department determined this with low confidence. Now, this is sort of an intelligence term that is used for spy agencies, things like that, when they're doing intelligence assessments and trying to figure something out that's behind a black veil. So you're trying to figure out where did this really come from. They're saying, we, the Energy Department, think it came from a Chinese lab, but we don't trust our assessment. Calling it low confidence means we might be right, but honestly, we don't put a lot of stock in our conclusion. But our conclusion, the evidence we've got points more to China than to anything else, but it's not a lot of evidence. That's the other part of the article that really pissed people off, because literally it said low confidence. Now, the other agencies that I forget, it wasn't medium, it was something higher. The other agencies that said that they do not believe it came from the Chinese government were actually a much higher confidence. Anyway, that Elise paid for the question, so we always talk about the paid super chat questions. That's what Elise is going to. Unfortunately, the very fact that it took me 5 minutes to explain it to you guys means it's yet another story that's going to go out there and convince everybody of another conspiracy, because that's the beauty of conspiracies. Conspiracies are very easy to explain in a second, and trying to disprove them takes 5 minutes. So thanks, New York Times. Yeah, I don't know what they were doing. I mean, I think it's worth publishing the story. Right. I mean, it's, why not? I don't have a problem with that. Thank you, was that Gigi for the duck? But, you don't say Energy Department determines it came from China. You got to figure out a better way to doing it. All right. So more of China, since we were talking about China, good segue, Elise. There's been concern about the Chinese giving lethal weapons to Russia. Thank you, Louis, for that. And they're not doing it yet that we know. We know that they're thinking of it. The U.S. has intelligence that the Chinese they're considering it. We decided to go public and say publicly that the Chinese are thinking strongly of doing this in order to scare the Chinese into not doing it. A couple different things. Some observers I read today said that they do not think that China will go ahead with it. Others think they may. Colonel Layton, who's very good, Cedric Layton, he's on CNN a lot. And he had said this weekend, thank you, Hector. He had said this weekend that he believed China was going to go ahead with it. And it's a big problem. I mean, China's got a lot of weapons. China has a lot of capacity. And it could, I think if China does this, the West is going to have to basically up the ante in terms of what weapons we give Ukraine, whether we will, because I still think the West is kind of doing this, we don't want to make Putin angry kind of BS. So let's see. China, also with China, Lukashenko. I started the show telling you about Lukashenko, who's the dictator of Belarus, which is this country right here, Ukraine. Belarus is right here. Russia's right here. Neighbors of Russia and compatriots with Russia in this war. Belarus has been helping Russia a lot in the war. Lukashenko is going to China. He will arrive tomorrow on a state visit. Lukashenko is one of the worst dictators in the world. It's China playing games, basically. Again, I think China is, they're playing games. I think China's trying to slap us around a little bit and go, fine. We're going to, you shut down our balloon, we're going to pal around with one of the dictators. What else we got? Power is back on across Ukraine. This is actually, I've got a lot of news today, so today might be a long news day. We'll see. The power is back on across Ukraine, and it's really interesting. Vlad, my friend Vlad in Ukraine, who gets me a lot of the, sort of the interesting stuff here. Actually, folks are explaining, somebody's asking in French about the symbol on my shirt. If somebody on TikTok wants to explain to them what it is. The Ukrainians had their power rationed. And I think I showed you guys the little spreadsheet where like the hours a day would change every day based on your neighborhood of how much power you'd get. And Ukrainians were basically getting 8 hours a day of electricity, and the other 16 hours, the power was turned off in their homes, their businesses everywhere. But the 8 hours were spread out. 4 of the 8 hours were always overnight. Thank you, Big Gator Girl. So 4 of the 8 hours were always from like midnight to 5 a.m. So you could use it, but it was more using it for your batteries and things like that. During the day, you basically only got 4 hours of power from like 8 a.m. to midnight. Imagine. Well, Ukraine now no longer has rationing. All the power's back on. There was a little glitch today in Odessa. Something went wrong, but they got it back on. But Vlad was telling me this 2 days ago. And it's funny. I didn't quite want to report it because I almost didn't want to go public and say, hey, the power's doing great. But it's all over the news now. And think about this. Russia has been bombing the hell out of these guys for months. Their goal was to destroy the Ukrainian power infrastructure. And the fact that Ukraine was able to get the power on 100% is unbelievable. It also is just another black eye for Russia. And reportedly now Russia's talking about going after oil, petroleum, and trying to go after that to try to once again take the Ukrainian economy down. Turkey, our good friend, says that talks are back on regarding NATO. You may recall that we are trying to get Finland and Sweden into Norway, not into Norway. You're okay, Norway. Sweden and Swinland. Sweden and Swinland. It's been months that I haven't done that mistake. Sweden and Finland into NATO, and the Turks and the Hungarians have been a pain. The Hungarians just announced again today that they were delaying their vote. Who knows why? But basically, the Turks and the Hungarians are the two countries, with the leaders they've got right now, both of their leaders are the most autocratic, really, of Europe. They're not democratic leaders. They are trying to basically hold the rest of Europe hostage and hold NATO hostage by doing this, trying to get something more. The Turks are doing it. The Hungarians are doing it. The latest from the Turks is they will talk to the Swedes and the Finns on the 9th of March, I believe, in a week, a little more than a week. But the Turkish foreign minister claimed again, which is a total lie. Thank you, Flower Lady. I think, that looks like a new one. Thank you for that. You like your flowers, I can tell. Flower Lady, duh. You got to wake up early to pull one on me. Thank you, Bonnie, for that. But the Turkish foreign minister said that the problem is that Sweden still hasn't fulfilled its commitments that it made last summer to Turkey. Sweden fulfilled all of its commitments months ago to Turkey. Everyone, all the experts agree. Sweden did everything it was supposed to do. And unfortunately, Turkey is playing games because the Turks and the Hungarians both are treating this like it's, the market in, a Middle Eastern market or something where we go and we negotiate all the prices, and basically, or Donald Trump's negotiations, because Trump admits to do the same thing. You sort of get people to the very end and then you try to get more. The Saudi Arabian foreign minister was in Kyiv today meeting with Zelensky. I don't have anything more on that. It's just interesting because the Saudis have been very unhelpful. We were hoping the Saudis were going to help us with oil prices last year, and they refused. So I just think it's interesting and not a bad thing, frankly. I know Saudi Arabia, I can't stand the Saudis. Okay. Horrible government, but nonetheless, when you're at war like this, you've got to, thank you, Louis. You've got to sort of, Ukraine needs all the friends it can get right now. Let me see what else. I'll sort of do quick on the other stories. Poland and the European Commission have gotten together and announced a joint initiative to find Ukrainian children illegally taken by the Russian army from the occupied territories. Thank you, Grayson, for the duck, Aflac. South Africa, there's a survey of South Africa. Actually, survey of South Africans asking them what country they would want to work in and bring their children up in other than South Africa. Thank you, Bonnie, for that. And they were given the choice of 6 countries: China, Russia, Cuba, Germany, the UK, and the US. Now, Russia, because the African National Congress, the one-party system that runs South Africa, thank you, Steve, for that, is super pro-Russia. basically refusing to take a side in the war, but they're doing military exercises with Russia, the whole thing, right? Because of Russia. Cuba was very supportive of the black majority that was being oppressed by the apartheid government. So Cuba, they've always had good relations with. So listen to these numbers of how they voted, okay? 34% of South Africans, and mind you, the government itself, pro-Russian. 34% of South Africans chose the US as the place that they would want to work and raise a family. 22% chose the UK. 11% chose Germany. 9% chose Cuba. 1.4% chose Russia. And 0.8% chose China. Which goes back to sort of my point. The Russians sit there and always beat their chest about, we're all the imperialists, right, in the West, and Russia is the true cultural powerhouse of the world. And as I always say, every year we've got a couple million, like 2 million people who try to come to our country illegally because they so want to get into America. And last year, we had 1 million people flee Russia because they didn't even want to fight for their own country in a war that their government had said was an existential war. And that tells you everything you need to know about Russia as far as, the cultural powerhouse of the world that 1.4% of the people want. I mean, how many people break into Russia is all I got to say. Prigozhin. I'm sorry. I did a lot of these are fun. I don't want to kill these stories because they're fun. We'll do our going a little long tonight so we have ample time for questions. Thank you for the heart there, Rose. Prigozhin is the Russian oligarch, the Russian billionaire who's been pissing Putin off lately because he runs a mercenary group, basically paid soldiers for hire, and they've been fighting in eastern Ukraine, but he's been criticizing the Russian government and the Russian military. So they started taking revenge on him and refusing to give ammunition to his troops while they're fighting in Ukraine. I mean, it's like chaos with the Russian military. Prigozhin now says that he is funding a contest to create a YouTube alternative for Russia, because YouTube itself is being, mind you, YouTube is totally free, is still available in Russia, but he claims YouTube won't give Russians a fair shake. So they're going to create a Russian YouTube. And that's like waiting for the jokes there. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev threatened nuclear war again today. I'm not even going to read his quote. This guy, and I'm not exaggerating, he threatens nuclear war usually every other day, literally every other day. They threaten nuclear war because they're losing. These are not the words and the threats of somebody powerful. They're not the words and threats of somebody who's winning. They're the threats of somebody who not only is losing, but somebody who I would say is a loser, in the sense that the person who threatens isn't just the one losing. The person who threatens is the one who doesn't have much power, right? If you know you can't win, if you know basically you're bluffing, you go, oh, I'm going to get you. You better watch it. I'm going to get you. The guy who's like got the power kind of just sits there and kind of looks at you and goes, really? Right? Like a bouncer at a club, right? The fact that the Russians have to say, I mean, literally every other day, we've got nuclear weapons. It's kind of like, I mean, you get it. Like, dude, we know you got nuclear weapons. We do too, which is why you're not going to do anything. But yeah, the dog that barks loudest. Exactly. The British reporter. Okay, this is the last story I have, but it's really interesting. I want to read you a little bit of this. Sky News has a reporter, Stuart Ramsey, who was injured in Ukraine last year. He shot himself, didn't shot himself. The Russians shot him in the back, of course, great Russians. And seriously injured. He had a jacket on, thank God, a flak jacket, whatever, but still, bullet went into his back, surgery, the whole thing. It's terrifying. He comes home and he gets questioned by a family member who doesn't believe him that he was shot in Ukraine. Listen to this. Stuart, I know my mom said you were shot in Ukraine, but were you really shot or did you make it up? He writes this in an article. He writes, I was genuinely shocked, a little lost for words, if I'm honest. I asked him why he didn't believe what had happened to me. Quote, It's just that online people say it was fake and that you weren't really shot. And I think they might be right. First of all, I'm kind of, to me, this is such a British exchange because in America, that first question alone would be a knockdown, drag out fight, at least in a Greek family. You'd be dead if you said that to me. If I was shot and you said, the online people say you're lying. Okay, not just the online people say you're lying, but I think they might be right. Can you believe this? So then he goes through and starts writing this. Oh, you are so going. I love blocking the bad guys. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. I occasionally have to block as well because it just makes me feel better, even though the mods are great at blocking, but sometimes I just have to. Anyway, he goes on and does this whole, he says like 15, 20-minute explanation of all that. He goes, at this point, I figure I've got to tell him. I show him the wound in my back. I explain the details. I explain where we were, how we got shot, how we had to escape, every inch of trying to escape, the whole story in detail, okay? And the guy turns to him and says, but how do you know it was the Russians? It could have been the Ukrainians. Now, his point in writing this is to talk about just how bad the misinformation is. Not the misinformation, excuse me, the disinformation is out there. That the lies, and unfortunately, it's, I don't even know what to call these people. It's they're partly MAGA. I mean, here in the States that are doing this. They're also MAGA. I'm not even sure it's not MAGA curious. I'm trying to find a word to use for these guys. Basically, a lot of the folks who like Trump, I don't mean regular voters out there. I mean the powerful people with mouths and influence. Those guys, and a lot of the same people who hang around Elon Musk online on Twitter. They're trying to put out the message that the war in Ukraine is actually a hoax. It's not actually happening. One of the top Twitter accounts with over 1 million followers that Elon is very close with. Elon is always corresponding with this account. The account, and I'll tell you right here, the account's name is Cat Turd. Turd in English means, crap. Cat Turd. So cat crap. The cat, like from your cat, meow. Okay. Cat Turd is the name of the guy's Twitter account. Over 1 million followers. Because again, he's being funny and the kids think it's funny. His account's named Cat Turd. Elon loves this guy, communicates with this guy. This guy puts out a message the other day. He bought Twitter Blue or whatever, which lets him write these longer tweets, and writes this whole thing about how, have you noticed how, mind you, listen, this is again the anatomy of how these guys lie, okay? He writes and says, have you noticed how you never see any videos of the war from Ukraine? You never actually see what's going on. You never actually see fighting. Mind you, okay, every one of you, I mean, granted, those of you who come here every day, you're invested like I am. But those of you who don't come that often to my show, you've seen videos of stuff from Ukraine. You've seen videos of fighting, right? There's exactly like Monica's saying, there's tons of videos. It's everywhere. First of all, like you said, watch CNN. Watch CNN, but also online, horrific videos on. I mean, like sometimes I'm watching videos and literally I've got to stop it because I'm like, okay, there'll be like a dead Russian pop in the picture, like a body. And I'm like, oh God, because I don't, not a fan of the Russians, but I really don't like seeing dead bodies, even if it's the bad guys in a war, right? But this guy writes this whole thing. Thank you, Lake Lady, for that. Writes this whole thing about how, again, he's over 1 million Twitter followers. He's got Elon Musk as somebody who communicates with him all the time. Okay. And Musk shares his stuff. This guy claims that the war is basically a fake, that there's something going on here. We're giving all this money, but nothing's actually happening. And right, Russian bloggers, I'm not surprised. This is, I mean, I think we, unfortunately, it started with the election hoax, BS, claiming that, the election was stolen from Trump. And again, it's unfortunate because all of this ties together. We kind of let them get away with that, okay? That led to the insurrection, January 6th. We kind of let them get away with that, really, right? I mean, let's face it. Some people went to jail, but come on. That they got away with. COVID then happens at the same time. little bit after. I mean, it happens simultaneously, but the same thing. What is COVID? COVID for the same group of people is one big hoax. COVID isn't real. It's not going to really make you sick. You know, I've got my cousin's dead husband who probably would say otherwise, but you know, COVID's not going to really make you sick. And I actually had a dead Greek girl I knew in New York who got COVID at the very beginning and it killed her. All the COVID, and they're still doing it today. These same accounts, I saw the other day, somebody again was going off. This guy this weekend on Twitter with a lot of followers, tens of thousands of followers, and was yet again talking about COVID and saying, these people who are still wearing masks, these people who are still getting their booster shots, these are people, and he's going off about them. And you're reading this and going, why do you care? Not to mention COVID. I mean, I care about COVID. I still wear a mask in big public places because I still don't feel like getting it. But also, like, none of us are talking about COVID anymore. You know what I mean? Like, who's talking about COVID? These guys will not let up. The lie, everything is the lie. And the thing is, it is about repeating the lie over and over and over. The fact that they are still trying to convince people that the COVID stuff is BS. They're very good at this. But then you get to the Ukraine stuff and Ukraine being a lie too. And you're dealing with the same crowd. And actually, one final point I'll make is, and I forgot, somebody wrote this today, and I wish I remembered who wrote this. Sorry. But actually, I think it was this Chris guy. I don't know who he is. Some guy, Chris, with some funny name on Twitter, who's a defense analyst who's very good, and did sort of a thread about this. And he was saying that, unfortunately, we've sort of entered an era now where people's perceptions of, I think this always existed, but it's much worse now. People's perceptions of facts are based on not just on their politics. That was always the case to a degree. I mean, not always, but that was always an influence there. But now you disbelieve something because the other guy believes it. In other words, if a Democrat is saying something is true, you will not believe it because it's a Democrat, right? And even though, thank you, Yuki, for that, even though COVID, there were a lot of Republicans as well who said COVID was real, doesn't matter. Trump was playing games with it, and the Democrats were very much on board saying we got to take COVID seriously. So because the Democrats said it, people had to say, oh, it's not true. Ukraine, unfortunately, it's been the Democrats that have been the most outspoken on behalf of Ukraine overall. Thank you, Joy. And thank you. Who was the, sorry, I was trying to say who was the, oh, there it is, Marcy. Thank you, Marcy, for that. And because it's Joe Biden taking the lead, a lot of people are saying we've just got to say no to Ukraine because it's Joe Biden, other than the lunatics. I mean, then you get the Looney Tunes on the far left, you know, the Greenwalds, Michael Tracy, that lunatic Mate. I mean, you get a bunch of those guys where there's, who knows what, Tulsi Gabbard, who knows what's going on with them, right? But in general, and it's just very weird to me. Climate change may be the one where it started with, if you think about it, right? Climate change was the one decades ago where they decided to make it political and decided to say, oh, no, we're just going to tell people it's not real. It's like, really? I mean, anyway, it freaks me out because I'm somebody who believes in science. I really do. Like, that's, anyway. All right, real quick. I'll tell you, I've got a Patreon as well. Thank you for the duck there, Aflac. And then we will go to questions. And because we went really long today with lots of news, we will skip the Discord tonight and I will do lots of news, lots of questions. I do have a Patreon as well. Please do frequent it if you can. It's patreon.com/Aravosis. You guys on TikTok can find it via the link in my profile, the Linktree link. For the rest of you, aravosis.com. And basically, Patreon is a really neat way. Oh, thank you, Cindy, for putting that up. Patreon is a really neat way that you can support people's their worth as well, but their work by donating a certain amount of money each month. Basically, $5, $10, $25. I've got one guy who's actually donating $100 a month, which I don't expect people to do. He's Arctic Legacy, ridiculously sweet guy for doing it, and I very much appreciate it. But it's a nice it's just a nice way for people like me who are doing this full time and basically trying to make a living doing this when nobody's paying me. You guys are paying me. Nobody is actually giving me money to do this. The Patreon helps a lot. So, and a lot of people have been stepping forward and helping with the Patreon. So thank you for that. So please go check it out. Patreon.com/Aravosis. And that would be lovely. All right, let's jump in and do our questions. So on TikTok, you can go to the, I'm blocking another person because I love doing that. On TikTok, go to the Q&A link in my profile. The rest of you can use the comment box at the bottom. And I am originally from the Chicago area. And please do keep the gifts coming on TikTok and the gifts coming on YouTube because I like them. So thank you all. All right, let's go with the questions. And like I said, we'll do a good half hour of questions if you guys have them. Thank you, Greg. Appreciate that. TikTok. That's funny. This Ukrainian creator who's very good. He's this young guy, and I'm laughing because he cracks me up. This guy, he's this Ukrainian soldier, and he's just funny. It's VAHA_UA. So VAHA_UA, but he's funny. I like the guy. Q&A, TikTok. Interesting question. I saw on the news from Magical Photo. What would you do if the attack was at your front door? What attack? You didn't give enough there. What would you do if the attack was at your front door? Do you mean like Ukraine? If you mean that, I'd be the first one joining the resistance and finding all sorts of really nasty ways to do really nasty things that I probably can't say on TikTok, I'm guessing. I am definitely not a military guy, but I like to think I'm a conniving a-hole when I can be. So hopefully I would join the resistance and cause a lot of pain. Do you see Russia kicking off trouble in Moldova as a distraction to Ukraine? I don't know what the hell Russia's doing in Moldova. It's really weird, or in Transnistria at least. So Moldova is a former Soviet country. So remember, the Soviet Union was made up of I keep saying I got to double check this. I think it was 15 countries, 15 republics. And basically they were independent countries that Russia, at the center of it, cannibalized all the countries surrounding Russia and turned them into one big, USSR, the Soviet Union. And the Ukraine was a part of it, whatever. The Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and Moldova was as well, among other places. Moldova, country right here, okay, more or less, or right here. And there's a portion of Moldova here called Transnistria that the Russians do what they always do, what they did in Ukraine, where basically they tried to foment a revolution and tried to basically make it a separate part. And it stayed very Soviet, basically, the Moldova. So there's like 1,500 Russian troops there or something. The Russians have been causing a lot of trouble. They've been making a lot of noise, like whether they might try to invade. I mean, it's very weird. Like whether their troops would try to invade Ukraine from Transnistria. Mind you, it's only 1,500 troops. It's not that much. They've been making a lot of talk about Ukraine supposedly is going to invade Transnistria. Now, one interesting thing about Transnistria is there's a huge weapons supply depot there. So the Russians have a ton of ammunition that would be really useful for the Ukrainians. And at the same time, the Ukrainians don't want the Russians to get that ammunition. So, maybe, but the way the Russians have been threatening, it almost sounds like Russia wants to invade. And it's just not quite clear. First of all, it's not quite clear how Russia would do it, but also why they would do it. They're already having enough time in the war. Why would they open up another front? So I just don't know. I think there's been a lot of talk. Thank you, Betty, for that, for the heart. I think a lot of it is the Russians also trying to basically force the Ukrainians. Exactly. Elisa's saying a distraction on TikTok. You got Transnistria over here. If you keep telling the Ukrainians, oh, look out, we may invade, we may do something over here with Transnistria, the Ukrainians are then forced to keep some of their troops over here when the fighting is actually over here. This is actually the front between Ukraine and Russian troops, okay, in Ukraine, over here. The big fighting is over here, right? You don't want to have to keep troops over here, right, all the way over here. But by the Russians constantly talking about it, they're basically trying to psych the Ukrainians into not having a choice, right? Keeping some troops here and basically just in case, but then the troops are wasted. Jens is saying there's talk about the tanks starting to arrive. Have you heard anything? There was already a couple days ago, a couple tanks arrived from Poland, I think. And I didn't get the numbers today. There was more talk today about more tanks arriving. What I didn't like about it was kind of one of those vague things, like, eventually two, I forgot what they called it, two, whatever it was, battalions, whatever the hell it was, of tanks may arrive. And I was kind of like, okay, May and when? So I didn't, I don't know. They did have a couple arrive from Poland. And I think Poland announced more tanks in the last couple of days. They may have announced, I think I'm thinking of this weekend when I was reading the news, but I wasn't preparing the show. Poland may have announced some additional tanks this weekend. All right, let's keep going here. Not much going on here. And Brave Cobra is asking on Twitch about Bakhmut. Bakhmut, as I was saying, like the big fighting going on is over here. Bakhmut is right here. Right east of Kramatorsk, southwest of Severodonetsk. Again, the front between the Russians and the Ukrainians. Lots of fighting. That's the area the Russians have been, going nuts on for a couple months, throwing their troops nonstop and basically throwing their troops without support. So these guys have just been thrown in there to get shot down by the Ukrainians. I mean, it's been a bloodbath. And the Russians were making advances, but not a lot. I saw something today. Thank you, Betty, for that. I saw something today that the Russians may have had a little bit more of an advance. At the same time, this weekend, yesterday I read about this. This weekend, there were reports that, again, it's only a matter of time before the Ukrainians pretty much have to give up Bakhmut. That it doesn't look like, it looks like eventually the Russians will get it. I just remember reading that again yesterday. From I forget who, one of the experts. So, I mean, what's interesting is, though, it just doesn't matter. I mean, the Russians are doing this because Putin needs a victory, and he needs any victory. This is a town that I think has a population of 70,000 under normal circumstances. It doesn't matter. I mean, strategically, it just doesn't matter. But, oh well, what do you do? They need something to point to, Sorry here. All right, let me go look at the TikTok questions again. Hang on, guys. I did see that. I don't know what was going on with that. Zelensky fired the general in charge of the Donbas defense. True. How will this affect Bakhmut? I was trying to see what was going on, and there's no more information on it. Basically, Zelensky fired one of his top commanders today. We don't know why, and they haven't released any more information about it. Now, typically, let me put it this way. There have been a lot of firings over the last few weeks of Zelensky firing basically corrupt leaders, that in order to show the West that he is serious about not letting basically corruption steal the money and the supplies we're giving, he's been firing people that have been caught doing anything. I mean, things including, one of the guys was using an official car as his own personal vehicle, which, is wrong, but it's not like he was stealing millions of dollars. Nonetheless, the guy was fired and being prosecuted, which is good, right? So it's possible he fired this commander for some kind of corruption charges dealing with taking kickbacks, right? Taking money. Maybe he took a percentage of the money that was going there. I mean, who knows? But something pretty serious had to happen for Zelensky to get rid of a commander in the middle of the war and one of his top commanders. So it's good that it's good that Zelensky did it. It's not good because it makes you wonder, what did this guy do? And if he's one of the top, if he was one of the top commanders, it's bad. That's bad. But what do you do? I'm glad Zelensky at least acted, but that's all there. He's not saying why, though. They're not letting it be known. All right. More questions, guys. Q&A. This is the thing I can't quite figure out either. So Nick is asking, why does Ukraine keep fighting for Bakhmut? It seems like they don't need it. Ukraine is almost surrounded in the city. Why keep fighting? I have not gotten a straight answer on this from anybody. The We do know that, and the Ukrainians did the same thing in Severodonetsk. Okay, Severodonetsk is a town that is right to the Bakhmut's like right here by my finger. Okay, Severodonetsk is right here. I mean, you can see my finger barely moving. They're not far away. Severodonetsk is that town way at the beginning of the war. I mean, it could have been, I don't know if it was May or something, but it was way months ago. And the Ukrainians just kept fighting and fighting and fighting. And supposedly they kept fighting the Russians there because they were trying to wear the Russians down. They were trying to, exactly, bleeding them out. Gunnar is saying the only thing that bleeding them out, meaning kill as many of the good Russians, make the Russians throw as many of their good troops and their good weapons as possible. So you can A, get rid of those troops, B, get rid of those weapons, right? C, even if you don't injure the troops or kill them, you make them very tired. They get fatigued. They can't fight anymore. The only thing that I don't understand with that, and I'd be curious, any of the military folks out there, don't you have the same problem yourself, though? If you are Ukraine and you're fighting the Russians over a city that doesn't matter, and it doesn't matter to you really as much either, Ukraine, yes, you're killing Russian troops, you're injuring Russian troops, you're destroying their equipment, you're bleeding them dry, but aren't they doing the same thing to you? That's the thing that I don't get. It's still now. Well, it says you lose a lot of men when you're on the defense, actually, but you lose a lot of men. You lose a lot of men when you're on the offense. More so, though. That's the only thing I was thinking is, comparing it. I'm just looking here to see what some of the folks on TikTok are saying. Yeah, but that's not the way it works either, though. Sorry, but Chevy Sprint is saying it's their city. It's like saying give up Albuquerque. No, because that's not how war works. No. You don't defend every city. You literally sit there and you strategically choose. We're going to go here. We're going to go here. We're going to pull back here. We're going to push here. You know what I mean? You don't just say no. Every city. You wouldn't do that. Right? It's true. That's okay. Well, okay. Small defendable front. What I'm wondering is just that whether Bakhmut, for some particular reason for the Ukrainians, is particularly defensible. So that basically, exactly, it's highly there you go. It's highly defensible, and they need the M3. So basically, it is a highly defensible area. So that if they were going to try to hurt the Russians somewhere, the Russians really want this city, and it's going to be very hard for them to get it. So maybe it is a good place. Let me step back and say, probably a lot more Russians are dying than Ukrainians in this battle for Bakhmut. That's my guess. And probably the Russians are losing a lot more of their equipment than the Ukrainians are. That's my guess. Because otherwise, I would agree. From a Ukrainian perspective, the city doesn't matter either. But the Russians are insane because the Russians are spending a lot of men and a lot of weapons on a city that just doesn't matter. Kharkiv, I mean, there's nothing really new about Kharkiv. Kharkiv is still free, but the Russians are still bombing it, Sorry, just seeing what else we got going on here. Yeah, I mean, fair enough. Actually, J404 is saying if your enemy is banging their head against a wall, you keep the wall. So I think that's just it. Russia is A, so insistent on getting this city, and B, it's a really bad city for Russia to try to take in terms of its ability to take the city. So the Ukrainians figure, you know what? This is a great it's a great opportunity for us to wear down the Russian military and not lose nearly as many of our troops as we would in a different battle. So I guess, yeah, if let's say you've each got this and both of you are losing, but if one guy's losing more, maybe you say, you know what, let's keep going because I'm losing, but he's losing a hell of a lot more. So yeah. Okay. Right, but the defenders, you could always escape with the defenders too. You could just have everybody pull out of the city potentially, right? As long as they're not surrounded. Anyway, it's just something I've been trying to figure out because there's an aspect of it that they're not quite. This aspect, no one has been explaining. They've just simply said, "Oh, the Ukrainians are staying in order to really hurt the Russians and cost them a lot of troops," but they're not giving 30-1. Well, if it is 30-1, yes, that would be a great deal. Copies. Copies is saying, Some of the records say that Russians are losing 4 to 10. Oh, 4 to 10 Russians for one Ukrainian soldier. But it's pretty similar to Severodonetsk, which is what I was saying. Yeah. So when it's no longer good, they'll pull out. Okay. So quite literally, it's the Russians are losing so many more men to how many the Ukrainians are losing, that the Ukrainians are saying, let's just keep fighting in this area, because anywhere else we fight, we're not going to have nearly, basically anywhere else we fight, we're going to lose more Ukrainians to every Russian killed. Whereas here you get it. More Russians die, fewer Ukrainians die. You might as well fight them here and pull their numbers down. Interesting though. Yeah. All right. Okay. Thanks, copies. I don't know. I mean, Arabella saying, do you think the Russians might have been fed false info about the city's value? Or the Russians have some secret plan as to why the city matters, you know? I mean, now some of the issue too with Bakhmut is, as we talked about, you know, Putin just needs a victory. So at this point, they've spent so many men and so much time trying to take the city that, and actually, and Prigozhin, initially it was Prigozhin. Prigozhin was the guy initially. It was his troops, those mercenary troops that were fighting in Bakhmut, the soldiers for hire. And he was trying to show up the Ministry of Defense. So the story was he was refusing to leave because he felt like he's got to show his men are better, and the defense ministry sucks. So he's going to win Bakhmut. He's going to be the big guy. Well, now it looks like he's been pushed out of the picture to a large degree. The Russian Ministry of Defense may now be in charge of the battle in Bakhmut. They stopped giving a lot of ammunition and stuff to Prigozhin. So it's not Prigozhin anymore necessarily, right? So why are they still, and you get it. I really don't get why the Russians are still fighting there. Let's see here. I don't think there's much change this week. Any update to the war map, movement forward, backward, anything at all? I mean, there basically I look at it every day, but I don't report on little stuff because I don't personally care, and I also don't know enough of the details to say, well, in this area they moved ahead a kilometer. You know what I mean? But I don't think there's anywhere that anything interesting happened in the last week as far as the front moving. I don't think so. Again, the Russians may be advancing a little bit. Thank you. Who is that? Betty and Bonnie for the gifts there. But it's been so gradual. No, I don't think so. Again, Bakhmut, the Russians have been advancing slowly. They have been advancing. You know, the map is a t-shirt. Yes. Oh, hey, Ruth. I do go live on Facebook too. Exactly. Well, you never know. Some people are on Facebook, so I figured, what the heck. Let me see, folks. Again, we'll still, if we've still got more questions, we'll do them. Otherwise, I can wrap up. Up to you guys. It's 10 after here. I mean, the China stuff, who knows? Again, a number of people are asking about whether China will arm Russia. I mean, I hope not, just because a lot of the big sort of defense folks are very worried that if China gets involved, it's going to make a big difference for Russia. I think China. I forgot I wanted to talk about this. One thing that is interesting is it puts Republicans in America in a very weird position if China more or less enters the war by giving Russia weapons. Because now this becomes not just Russia's war, but China's war. And Republicans have, a lot of them, sadly, have a sympathy, not all, right? There's a lot of Republicans that are still good on the war, but the MAGA Republicans in particular are very bad. And Ron DeSantis gave some really nasty comments a couple days ago as well, who might be he's going to be running for president as a Republican. He gave some nasty comments about, shouldn't be supporting Ukraine. Even worse was Josh Hawley, who's a Republican senator from Missouri, who came out and said, either you're for supporting Ukraine or you're for supporting America. It was horrific comments from this guy. These guys loathe the Chinese like nobody's business. Every time they refer to China, they call it communist China. Every time they refer to China, they don't say China, they say the Chinese Communist Party. So for example, they wouldn't say, Republicans are very good at messaging. They wouldn't say China is considering giving weapons to Russia. They would say the Chinese Communist Party is considering giving weapons to Russia, because it sounds much worse, right? Because even actually, they're not wrong. To an American audience, at least, if you say the Chinese Communist Party is thinking of giving weapons to the Russians, you'd be like, holy crap, the communists. Whereas China, it's a messaging point thing. I think it puts them in a very bad position if China gets involved, because then you're going to see these MAGA Republicans and very extreme, not very extreme, but very conservative Republicans who hate China, having to basically side with China and say, okay, we're going to let China basically help win a war in Europe against us. Let's see. I think it puts them in a weird spot. So, I mean, as much as I do not want China to help, but I think if I were China, I'd be worried about not just a massive sanction. I think China will face big sanctions from the U.S. I don't think Biden would have a choice. I think there would be big economic sanctions against China if they enter. I don't think we have a choice but to do it. But it also could convince the Republicans that they don't have a choice but to keep supporting Ukraine, which, a lot of them don't want to do. All right, let's do one or more, and then we'll call it quits here, guys. Will Ukraine be given fighter jets? No. Ambassador McFaul brought this up. He was our former ambassador to Russia, and he said this weekend, and he said, remember something. He said, all of this talk about how oh, my dog escaped from my bedroom. All of this talk about how, whether we give F-16s, the modern American fighter jets to Ukraine is forgetting something and saying, oh, the F-16s are too advanced. He said last March or April, we were talking about giving Ukraine, several hundred Polish MiG fighter jets, the kind of fighter jets more or less the kind of fighter jets that Ukraine already flies. A little bit different, but more or less the same. Why is and basically he didn't want to say it exactly, but why is the Biden administration keep explaining that we can't give planes to Ukraine because they're too advanced, our planes are, and not talking about, but there's all of these other planes that we could have given almost a year ago and we didn't. Why aren't we giving them now? Because those are planes clearly Ukraine could use, and we're not talking about it. I think, unfortunately, this whole plane thing, it's part of the larger problem of giving weapons to Ukraine. The Biden administration, and mind you, the French and the Germans, are worried about escalation, pissing off Vladimir Putin, so they don't want to do it. And they're still afraid of giving the weapons to Vladimir Putin. So forget the F-16s. We're still waiting for the MiG fighter jets to go. And at some point in 6 to 9 months from now, when the war is going worse and Ukraine's in trouble, the Biden administration will probably go, oh my God, we've got to help Ukraine more. And just like every step of, Biden has done an amazing job, but he's been afraid of Putin from the beginning. And he's got some advisors who have convinced him that this isn't, we've got to help, but we don't really have to help. Slow rolling it. That's exactly, everything's slow rolling it. And they're just going to keep slow rolling it. And honestly, if you're going to fight a war, but you don't, it's like Vietnam or something. Like we're going to slowly do more and more every year, slowly. It's like fight or don't fight. I feel like Yoda, fight or don't fight, but my God. Anyway, how you doing, kid? Oh, she's wandering around the kitchen. Anyway, all right, guys. I am getting tired, and I feel like the questions are dying back a little here. That was a sad way to end the show. I mean, I will do a quick summary of the news that we talked about, but no, we're still in this not quite wanting Ukraine to win situation. It's just pissing me off. I don't know. The war could go on for years, but Afghanistan and Iraq went on for 20 years. So, do or do not. There is no try. That's exactly it. Yep, exactly. All right, let me do a quick summary of the stories we covered today, and then I will call it quits. And there you go. So here we go, guys. It appears Belarusian partisans attacked, well, they say they attacked and damaged a Russian AWACS plane, which would be a big deal. Thank you, Big Gator Girl. British intelligence is reporting that there have been at least 14 explosions in Russian-occupied Mariupol, which is interesting because you'd think everybody thought it was beyond the range of Ukrainian weapons. So now we're wondering, do the Ukrainians have a new weapon we don't know about? We don't know about, but maybe our government knows about. Putin gave a weird speech about how the West is trying to break Russia apart. No news yet on China providing lethal weapons to Russia. China is hosting Lukashenko, the dictator of Belarus, on Tuesday for a state visit. Power is back on across Ukraine and has been for 2 weeks now. So they're no longer rationing power in Ukraine, which is a big deal. Thank you, Bonnie, for the star. I know, Attackums, tell me about it. Turkey says talks are back on with Sweden and Finland to talk about whether they can join NATO, but Turkey's still playing games. Hungary has signaled a further delay in its vote on those countries joining NATO. Zelensky met today with the Saudi foreign minister in Kyiv. European Commission and Poland announced a joint initiative to find Ukrainian children illegally taken by the Russian army from occupied territories. The Russians have basically been kidnapping thousands, if not more, of Ukrainian kids. A survey of South Africans found that even though the government is super pro-Russian and refusing to criticize Russia in the war, 34% of South Africans would choose to work or raise their families in the U.S. more than any other country. So the people are super pro-American. The government is not. Prigozhin, the oligarch in Russia, is funding a contest to create a YouTube alternative called Video Revolution. Former Russian President Medvedev is threatening nuclear war again. And a British reporter in Sky News wrote a really interesting story about how his family member, when he got home from the war and had been shot, his family member didn't believe he was shot because he read on the internet that his family member was lying about being shot. So he didn't believe him, which was just insane. Anyway, all right, guys, that is it for tonight. I'm going to skip the Discord, like I said, tonight, because now I'm tired. Woo, the show knocks me out. Excuse me. Oh, boy. But thank you for joining us. Thank you for the gifts. Thank you, moderators, for going after all the trolls. And as always, I will be back tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, U.S. I do this every day, Monday to Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 6 p.m. New York City time. In the meantime, you can go check out our Discord. I'll check in the Discord just to check in writing. I check in there multiple times a day. It's discord.aravosis.com. Check out my Patreon, patreon.com/Aravosis. All those links are you guys on my laptop there. You can find it at aravosis.com right at the bottom of the screen. And you guys can find all those links on TikTok in my profile. Just the Linktree link will take you to my Patreon, my Discord, my PayPal if you want to help there, my LinkedIn if you want to read who I am, all sorts of fun stuff. So, all right, guys, thank you so much. We will see you all again tomorrow. All right. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.